So we just talked about catabolic reactions. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit to anabolic reactions. So what is ATP and energy, and where do we get it from? So in our body, energy is stored as ATP. That's the structure we looked at previously. What happens is that when you hydrolyze one of the phosphates on ATP, it releases 7.3 kcals of energy. So you guys might not be, actually, you could be. So a kcal is actually the same thing as like a calorie. So a calorie on like a bag of chips or something like that. I don't know, I have a snack here. The calories that it shows on the top here, that is actually the same thing as kilocalories. So 7.3 kcals is actually the same as 7.3 calories of a food. So when you hydrolyze, so when you break this bond here, when you break it, you end up, that bond in it has stored 7.3 kcals of energy. So each one of those phosphodiester bonds that you break, you form 7.3 kcals. So if the process allowed for it, you could also break ADP into AMP, and that would also give you another 7.3 kcals of energy. So the overall formulas down here are helpful in this. If I can draw. So ATP would then go from, ATP would form ADP plus a phosphate and would release 7.3 kcals per mole of energy. And then you could also do the same thing. ADP releases a phosphate and 7.3 kcals per mole of energy and has AMP as the final product. So just to clarify, it's 7.3 kcals of energy per mole. So that's not for one molecule. That is if you have a mole of those molecules. So divided by a lot. So the hydrolysis of ATP. So where does this happen? Let's say we contract our muscles. Well, a lot of us are into exercising or helping people exercise. Every time we contract our muscles or we move substances across cellular membranes, or if we send a nerve signal, or if we synthesize an enzyme, we synthesize a protein, anything that our body has to use energy for gets its energy from ATP hydrolysis. So to give you a little bit of a, remember hydrolysis? Let's write that real quick. Hydrolysis is water, and then lysis, splitting. So water splitting is hydrolysis. So up in this example here, when we cut this bond right here, we put a hydrogen and an OH to fill in the other two spots. So you need water for this process to occur. Okay, but let's go back and see what scale this happens on our body. So 1.1 to 2 million ATP molecules can be hydrolyzed per second in your body. So a typical human has approximately 100 grams of ATP in their system constantly. So we have all of the AMP that's in our RNA, right? But we also have the ATP that is just in our bodies, probably in our mitochondrion, and then goes out around to energize things. There's a really high turnover. So 100 grams kind of may sound like a lot. It's really not that much, maybe like half a coffee cup worth of ATP. So there's actually, I mean, that is kind of a lot, but there's also a really high turnover of ATP molecules in our body. So a human that's resting will use approximately 40 kilograms of ATP within 20 hours. So that's a lot. I think that's about 90 or 100 pounds of ATP. So that means that we're making ATP, but then our body takes that ADP that was formed and the phosphate and rejoins them back together over and over and over, because we're not consuming 40 kilograms of this thing like we're not feeding ourselves this ATP. So our body has to reform it in that catabolic cycle. So during strenuous exercise, 0.5 kilogram of ATP can be used each minute. So it increases significantly if you're exercising. So for example, a 2-hour run can use up to 60 kilograms of ATP, which is about 132 pounds. So you use if you run for 2 hours, any of you run marathons, you use a person's worth of ATP in that marathon. And then the next question here is ATP hydrolysis involved in catabolic or anabolic processes. So take a minute, remember what each of these means. Okay, so ATP synthesis is when we use, ATP hydrolysis is when we use the energy. So this is going to be a catabolic process. So we're breaking apart things using the energy. Catabolic would be when we put those ADP to ATP to store the energy. So anabolic. And then let's look at an example real quick of the use of ATP in muscle contraction. So this picture here is muscle fibers. So our muscles are made of myosin and actin. So actin is kind of the glue, and then myosin is like the rubber bands that actually contract. So myosin contracts, slides closer together when nerve impulses increase by calcium ions by opening calcium channels. So when our brain says, I want that muscle to contract, your body responds by opening calcium channels, calcium ion channels. When you add calcium ions to your muscle cells, as well as ATP, you put energy into the process, you release that energy and your ADP and phosphate, and that allows your muscles to have enough energy to contract. So the myosin then has the ability to contract. So your muscles, your myosin gets the energy from ATP when calcium is around in this particular case to signal that that's what needs to happen. So that muscle contraction will continue as long as both ATP and calcium levels are high enough around the filament. So there's not enough ATP, your body just physically, but you're trying to like your brain is telling your body to contract that muscle, but there's no energy left, there's no power left, then it just can't happen. So as long as you have both the calcium and the ATP around with high enough concentrations, the muscle continues to contract. When your nerves, your nervous system tells your impulse to end, so tells your muscle to relax, the calcium channels close, so then you don't have calcium in that area anymore. And since the calcium concentration goes down, the ATP pumps, the ATP that's left pumps the extra calcium that's in that cell or whatever you're looking at, pumps it out of the system and causes the muscle to relax. So the ATP is then there's a little bit of ATP is used to get it out of the system that it's in. But other than that, once you lose that impulse and there's no more calcium there, your muscles relax. So ATP gets put into the process to help your muscles contract, specifically with calcium. So learning check, excuse me, learning check right now. Just real quick, classify each of the following as ATP or ADP plus phosphate, so PI. So take a moment and think about, based off of the different characteristics of maybe catabolic or anabolic reactions, think about what you would need in order for this reaction to occur. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the answers as always, but you guys should pause the video and try it on your own. So the first one, A, is used in anabolic reactions. So anabolic reactions are when we use energy, not storing energy, but we use the stored energy. So that energy we're using is stored in ATP molecules. So we're going to put ATP. Okay, B, the energy storage molecule. So we just talked about this. Where is the energy stored? Well, it's stored in that bond, the oxygen, the phosphorus diester bond. That PO bond is where the energy is stored. And we have more of that in ATP. So where ATP is the answer for B. C, coupled with energy requiring reaction. So coupled with the reaction, meaning it's required, the energy is required in order for the process to occur. So we need the stored energy, ATP. Okay, and then D, hydrolysis products. So the products of hydrolysis of ATP would be ADP plus phosphate.